Hi, and welcome back to the next video in the Dominion video tutorial series. In this video, we're going to be talking about deck control and payload. What do these things mean, and how can we use them to make our Dominion play better? So let's start out with deck control. What is deck control? Deck control conceptually is anything that helps you play cards. So that includes plus actions and villager tokens, moving your cards from one place to another, making cards that weren't your cards into your cards, or making cards no longer your cards. Well, I mean, that'll do it right there, but what does that mean, right? I just used terms that the game defined for me to talk about this. In English, let's talk about what this means, and we'll do a quick summary of what's going on here. The deck control concept includes villages and also just getting plus actions. It includes draw, but also includes just getting plus cards or discarding cards. It includes the concept of playing your best cards more often. A lot of people will call that cycling, but remember, it's playing your best cards more often. That's a deck control concept. And then there are things that change the number of cards you have to draw, like trashing cards or similar effects, or adding cards to your deck or discard. So let's just go into a little bit more depth on what each of these points means. The first one, plus actions and villager tokens. We care about this because in order to play action cards, you usually need actions, and that's kind of the whole point. Action cards are usually great. I want to play them. I'm going to need actions if I want to do that, and that dovetails right into the village concept. Now, just be aware that even though a card may not be a village, it still kind of helps you here, because let's say I play a card that gives me +1 action. Maybe that wasn't a village, but it's still pretty good for helping me play other actions, even though it doesn't give me that same village effect. So the second one, moving your cards from one place to another. What does this include? The first one, I mean, it includes playing cards, which is kind of the whole point, right? I'm moving cards from my hand to my play area. Woo! That's the point, and that's deck control. Putting cards into my hand. So the concept of draw works here, or really anything that helps me put cards into my hand. From my deck, there's plus cards. Even if it wasn't draw, even if it didn't increase the number of cards, still just plus cards will help me towards this effect. But, you know, any card that just says put it in your hand and doesn't say plus cards, I mean, obviously that's still the same concept. It's deck control. I care about that because once they're in my hand, it's a lot easier for me to play the cards, right? There's moving cards to your deck or discard pile. So a lot of the cycling concept comes into play here. I can put cards on top of my deck, and that helps my deck control, assuming I wanted to play the card. Or there's filtering, increasing the quality of cards from my hand, or discarding from hand. That's like a negative deck control. If someone plays a militia on me, I have to discard 2 cards. That's deck control, right? Because it's harder for me to play those cards, but it's bad deck control. So you know, deck control works both ways in this case. There's also like setting stuff aside and mats and most of the tokens that modifying cards. That's all deck control. It falls under this umbrella here. The third one is making cards that weren't your cards into your cards. So this is the effect of gaining cards, but be careful here because gaining cards is not deck control. But once the card has been gained, it's yours, and once the card is yours, or if it's in your deck or discard or something, you're going to have to draw that card at some point, and that's the deck control concern. This is actually a negative effect on your deck control, because drawing cards is hard. It takes effort to do that, and if I didn't have to draw this card, maybe I could draw something else. So if I'm putting a card in my deck, I have to think about, well, I'm going to have to draw this card eventually. Now, if it's a good card, that's fine. I'm happy to do that. But if it's not a good card, maybe someone played a witch on me, and now I have this curse. I'm going to have to draw that curse. So I'm going to have to deal with that. So every card you gain, regardless of its source, once you gain it, it becomes yours, and now there's this deck control concern. I'm going to have to draw that card. So the concept of the cantrip was useful here because it's pretty much effortless to draw that card because I can just play it, draw the next thing, and I'm not hurt in most ways unless there's some edge case here. So, you know, a cantrip example is helpful here, but, you know, every time you gain a card, you just have to think about, I'm going to draw that card. And then the other counterpoint to this is making cards no longer your cards. So mostly this is trashing cards. I can get rid of cards that I don't want to draw. But once it's no longer yours, of course you don't have to draw it anymore. And then all the ways that are a little weird where you don't have to draw it anymore, but it's still yours. That's the same concept, although that fit in the second bucket in there, and that's really not important to the point of deck control. The point is all of these effects will help you play other cards, and so they're deck control. Great. So now payload. What is payload? Well, that's pretty easy. Payload is defined as anything that isn't deck control. We did it, guys. We defined payload, but that doesn't help. So let's explain what it actually means. Conceptually, payload cards are the cards that help you win the game. So deck control just helped you play other cards, and payload is the point of it all. These are the cards I play that actually help me win the game. So what are some examples of different types of payload here? Oh, there's money and buys. Money and buys are great for winning the game because you can buy cards that are worth points, you know. You can get tokens like coffers or VP tokens. These help you win the game. Debt tokens, they're payload, but they're like the negative payload. If I take a lot of debt, that hurts me, but if I pay off my debt, it helps me. So that's payload. All that is payload. There's gaining cards. So, you know, the fact that I'm gaining cards matters in terms of payload because maybe the cards will help me win the game. But once the card is mine, there's the deck control concern of, oh, I have to draw this card. So if I buy a province and it's worth points, you know, that was great for my payload, but it was bad for my deck control. And that's kind of the whole point of the game, right? That's why Dominion isn't a super easy game. And then finally, there's playing attack cards. We can consider playing the attack card as payload. But sometimes the attack will have a negative effect on our opponent's deck control, like we talked about earlier with the militia or the witch. So you can consider the effort you go through to play the card as being payload, but if it negatively affects the opponent's deck control, you can prioritize playing that attack card in terms of, well, this is deck control. I care about it like I care about deck control, even though it really is payload. And you're going to see a lot of examples of that, where I want to get payload so I can help deck control or hurt my opponent's deck control. That's something that's pretty common. So let's just dip our toe in why this actually matters. And let's try and evaluate some cards in terms of payload or deck control. So any particular card actually doesn't have to be just a payload card or just a deck control card. Cards usually have components of both deck control and payload. So for example, Market has both deck control and payload components. The card and the action are deck control components, and then the dollar and the buy are payload components. Similarly, Vassal, the 2 money that it gets you is a payload component, and then the whole shenanigans with I discard a card and maybe I can play it, those are deck control components. And then Workshop, the example, I gain a card and that's payload, but then once it becomes mine, I have to draw it, and then we talked about cantrips. So I can take any card in the game, and if I break it down, I can say, well, these are the deck control components, and these are the payload components. And then if I'm thinking, well, maybe I need deck control or payload, that can help educate decisions I make. The next video is going to take a much deeper dive into how we can use the concepts of deck control and payload and then this card evaluation in order to really educate our decisions we make and improve our Dominion play. But for now, if you're just able to identify this card is deck control, this card is payload, then this video has served you well. So, see you next time in the next video, and we'll go even deeper.